Imagine you've gone to the beach with your loved ones. While there, you meet a new couple and get to know them well. One day, they invite you to their house. However, after arriving, one unsettling experience after another begins to unfold. Events that cannot be stopped or shared with anyone. Today's strange story will test your endurance at every moment. John, Louise, and their only daughter Agnes came to Italy from Denmark on holiday. While having fun in the swimming pool, a stranger named Patrick asked them for an extra chair, and John gave it to him. During the evening dinner together, Patrick introduced himself to everyone in a friendly manner and enjoyed the time with them. That night, John noticed Patrick standing outside their room, watching them. Patrick left as soon as John saw him. The next morning, when they went out for a walk, Agnes lost her favorite doll. John went to find it. Perhaps Agnes lost the doll somewhere on the road. After searching for a while, he found the doll and returned to discover that Patrick had joined his family. Patrick then told them that he was visiting from the northern tip of Italy with his wife Karen and their son Abel. Abel remained silent during the introduction. Patrick explained that Abel was afraid to talk to new people. After the introductions, they all went to lunch together. As soon as the food was on the table, Abel began eating as if he hadn't eaten in a long time. Patrick revealed that he was a doctor by profession, while Karen was a housewife. Over time, the two families developed a good friendship. Several months passed like this. One summer vacation, Patrick invited John and his family to their house for a week. Since Louise had mentioned she liked to go somewhere secluded from the hustle and bustle, she agreed to the plan. Finally, they set off in the car. After an 8-hour drive, Patrick welcomed them to his home. Their house was located in a beautiful area of the forest, which pleased John and Louise. However, the house was a bit small. They arranged a small bed for Agnes in Abel's room. That night, Patrick cooked grilled chicken. Although Louise was a vegetarian, Patrick offered her some grilled chicken. After much insistence, Louise reluctantly agreed to try it. When John went to throw away the leftovers after the meal, he saw Abel standing alone. The child seemed as though he wanted to say something. John was startled when Abel looked at him, because Abel had no tongue. Just then, Patrick called Abel and he drifted off to sleep. When John asked Patrick about this, Patrick explained that Abel suffered from a condition called congenital aglossia since childhood, which meant his tongue was either undeveloped or very small. The next morning, they went for a walk near the house, where they found Abel sitting alone under a sleeper. Agnes asked Abel to move, but he didn't budge. At that point, Patrick grew very angry and grabbed Abel by the neck, much to John and Louise's shock. As things became a little uncomfortable, Louise whispered to John that they should go back to their house. But just then, Karen appeared. She told them they would be going to a restaurant for dinner that evening. That night, when they were all ready to go out, Patrick called a babysitter named Muhajid, as they had decided to go to the restaurant without the kids. Louise found it strange but didn't say much out of politeness. While ordering food, Louise reminded everyone that she was a vegetarian, but she ended up eating fish. Seeing Karen and Patrick dancing over drinks after dinner, it seemed to John and Louise that they might not be as close as the other couple. Karen and Patrick's relationship seemed quite public. John and Louise were also shocked to see how intimate Karen and Patrick had become. During the bill payment, John assumed that since Patrick had invited them to dinner, Patrick would pay. But Patrick created a situation where John ended up paying the entire bill. On the way home, John and Louise felt increasingly uncomfortable, but no one wanted to address it directly. Patrick then turned on loud music in the car, but despite Louise repeatedly asking him to lower the volume, he didn't listen. John silently smiled and endured it all out of politeness. When they returned home, they found Agnes sleeping downstairs in the small bed, while Abel was upstairs. Usually as guests, they were treated differently, but this time, their host's behavior was completely unexpected. That night, while John and Louise were spending quality time together, Agnes knocked on the door, but they ignored her. At that moment, John suddenly noticed that Patrick was watching them. However, Patrick left without saying a word. Later that night, Louise woke up to find Agnes lying in Patrick's room, while Patrick was completely naked. Horrified by the scene, Louise refused to stay in the house for another moment. She quietly took Agnes in her arms and told John, "I'm leaving this house now." They left the house immediately in their car. Abel, standing alone by the window, looked as if he wanted to say something, with a deep pain in his eyes. After driving for quite some time, Agnes realized she had left her favorite doll in the house. When Agnes started crying for the doll, John decided to return to the house. Upon arrival, John got out to retrieve the doll, but Agnes noticed it had been under the car seat the entire time. Louise rushed inside to call John, and to their surprise, everyone in the house was awake. Patrick began questioning them, asking why they had left the house so abruptly. John then explained to Patrick, "Agnes isn't used to sleeping in such uncomfortable conditions, so we decided to leave." Louise added, "Despite knowing I'm a vegetarian, you kept feeding me meat. Moreover, the way you've treated us has been far from polite, which is why we were leaving." Karen then responded, "We've treated you like part of our family, so we forgot about certain preferences like your vegetarianism. If you had just mentioned it earlier, I would have made a special meal for you. And our house isn't as big as yours, which is why we couldn't provide a separate king-sized bed. We thought putting Agnes in Abel's room would help Abel bond with her, as he doesn't have any friends and has a speech impediment." After hearing this, Louise said, "At night, Patrick was lying next to my daughter in an inappropriate position. How can you justify such behavior?" Karen replied, "What happened was a mistake, but it cannot be undone. You're free to leave, but if you choose to stay, today could still turn out well." After much hesitation, they agreed to stay, out of politeness. Around noon, Patrick took John for a drive, and with John's permission, turned on the radio. As they listened to music, John opened up about his thoughts, saying, "Sometimes in life, we keep quiet about the things we don't like for the sake of others' happiness." Patrick apologized to John for what happened the previous night and encouraged him to shout in an open space to release his frustration. After returning home, the two of them shared a pleasant time together. However, later that day, Louise accidentally cut her finger while cooking and asked Patrick to check it. That's when they discovered that Patrick was not actually a doctor. He had lied about his profession to gain everyone's attention during their earlier meetings. In reality, Patrick is unemployed. He doesn't have a job, which surprises both Louise and John. They're left speechless, unsure of how to respond as they face one uncomfortable situation after another. Soon, they notice that Karen is becoming increasingly controlling over Agnes. She dictates how Agnes should arrange her food, how she should eat, even acting as though she were Agnes's mother. As things escalate, Louise is forced to speak up, though John, ever polite, prefers to avoid confrontation. After the meal, Agnes and Abel are supposed to perform a dance together. While Agnes executes it perfectly, Abel struggles. Despite his efforts, Abel cannot match Agnes's performance. Patrick reacts cruelly, scolding Abel harshly for his failure. Louise steps in and forbids Agnes from dancing anymore, sensing the situation turning toxic. But Patrick, unwilling to relent, insists that Abel must continue. Abel begins to cry. Although John opposes Patrick's actions, it's Louise who is forced to step in and handle the situation in a way that John should have. Later that night, John hears Abel crying again. After a few grumbles from Patrick, the house falls eerily quiet. The night's silence grows heavier, an oppressive unease settling in the air. When John wakes up, he notices the barn door swaying in the wind. Curious, he walks over and is startled by what he finds inside. There are numerous suitcases and bags scattered across the room. On the walls hang countless photos, each one featuring a different couple, alongside Patrick, Karen, and a baby. But with each new picture, the children have changed. It's in this moment that the horrifying truth unravels. Patrick and Karen are a psychopathic couple. Every year, they seek out new couples on holiday, befriend them, invite them into their home, and eventually kill them. The children are kept alive, used to lure new victims, but their tongues are cut off to prevent them from speaking. Abel's tongue was cut off as part of this horrific pattern. From the very beginning, Abel had been trying to warn them. John, now consumed with fear, is paralyzed by the revelation. Yet the worst is still to come. When he steps into the adjacent bathroom, he is horrified to find Abel's lifeless body floating in the water. There is no time to waste. John grabs Louise and Agnes, rushing them into the car. But there's a terrifying problem. The car is almost out of fuel. Patrick had drained it. Desperate, John drives as far as he can. As they approach a dark, isolated area, a black car speeds past them and blocks their path. Realizing he is no longer on the main road, John tries to veer off to a side road, but the car becomes stuck in the pitch-black surroundings. In the distance, John spots a light glowing faintly from a house. Leaving Louise and Agnes in the car, John walked toward the house for help, only to see Patrick watching him from the black car. Disappointed by finding no one at the house, John returned to the car, but it was empty. The streets were eerily quiet, with people running frantically, but John couldn't find his wife and daughter anywhere. Desperate, he began to scream loudly. Suddenly, Patrick's car pulled up, and Patrick said, "Good luck calling out. If I had been a little later, I would have left already. Louise and Agnes are with us." Patrick then ordered John to get into his car. John, utterly broken and drained of courage, obeyed without resistance. As they drove, Patrick stopped the car in the middle of the road to relieve himself. John had a fleeting moment to run away with the car, but his fear paralyzed him. This scene illustrates how helpless a man can become when he loses his sense of responsibility and masculinity, succumbing to failure. After a while, the car stopped on an empty road, where Muhajid was standing in front. For a brief moment, John tried to gather the courage to act, but Patrick quickly punched him, breaking his nose. At that moment, Louise realized the horror that was about to unfold. Before she could intervene, Karen appeared and cut out Agnes's tongue, handing her over to Muhajid. Patrick then forced John and Louise on a long drive. Throughout the journey, John sat in silence, numb and incapable of thinking or taking any action. The weight of helplessness consumed him. Eventually, Patrick and Karen forced John and Louise out of the car, stripped them naked, and began hurling stones at them. This inhuman torture went on for some time before they crushed their heads with a heavy stone. The scene then flashes forward to a few months later. Patrick and Karen are on a summer vacation with Agnes, now their adopted child. They are enjoying their time, meeting new people, and, together, they search for their next target. Although the entire focus of the story is on the couple, Louise and John, the main character is actually Abel. He silently endured everything, but still tried to save them and dreamed of freeing himself. However, in a cruel twist of fate, that dream ended forever. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.